This game used to be a lot more interesting. UConn Seton Hall, a preview after this.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. This has been an amazing journey with love all of our everydayers. Really appreciate your support. If you like our show, subscribe, follow us on all the Apple, Spotify, the whole deal. We're the only daily podcast covering both the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world. And we're proud to bring you that coverage because this fan base deserves it. Today's episode is, before we get to today's episode, want to tell you about, look, we have a partnership with Husky Ticket Project. We love working with them. We donate 10% of our revenue to sending kids to UConn games. They were at the Ice House and went to UConn hockey when I was up on campus. Definitely sent some kids there. I'm sure we're going to have some folks in the stands for the Villanova game where I'm there as well. Really appreciate Kevin Solomon and his group. So today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Okay. This UConn versus Seton Hall game is not as sexy as Creighton and St. John's. Let's just be honest, right? This Seton Hall team under Shaheen Holloway has suffered from a lack of NIL options. And it's one of the programs in the Big East that I feel is a sleeping giant that if they do ever get their house in order, Shaheen can coach. And players like to coach for him. Players like to play for him because he's a player's coach, but he's hard. He's tough. He's tough on the kids, and it's just such a bad fall from grace. And it's partly based off of him, but it's really not. And I think the buck stops with him, right? If he was able to keep Dylan Aduwasu, who was on that team the last couple of years as well, but outside of that, everyone is pretty much new. And that's sad. They got Scotty Middleton out of Ohio State, who's a former 4 or 5-star recruit. Actually, someone that I thought maybe UConn could grab because he's a 6'7" wing that kind of fit the UConn profile of athletic and smart guard who shoots it pretty well from 3, 38%. This team is not very good. For context, they're 213 in KenPom, and Quinnipiac right there in Hamden is 201. Central Connecticut State, the Blue Devils, and Pat Sellers and his gang is 180. Seton Hall is 223 in the net rankings, awful. But if we're being fair, two other Power 4 or Power 5 conference teams in Miami and BC are 216 and 222 in the net rankings. So even though Seton Hall is the worst team in the Big East, they're not the worst of the Power 5 kind of dismantling, right? Where it's like the haves and the have-nots. The ACC has like the I don't know if this is a word, the top heaviest conference of any conference in the country because there's a huge drop-off between Duke and number 2 Louisville in that conference. There's not a big drop-off between St. John's, Marquette, UConn, and Creighton. There just isn't. There's like a couple of points here or there. And then the same thing, the next best team is Clemson. I know Clemson beat Duke, so maybe there's a minor drop off between Duke and Clemson. But if you look at the polls, you'd think that Duke was the greatest team of all time, right? Top 2 in the country, and then Clemson just barely in the AP. We'll see what happens when they play on the road, but I just think the context is all based around how poorly the Seton Hall team has played is due to a lot of players just leaving for greener pastures. And so one of which is Kadari Richmond, who we just saw in stores and who we just saw Villanova beat. But even Rick Pitino mentioned that, like, if Kadari Richmond got the same money at Seton Hall, he'd still be playing for the Pirates. And this game probably looks a lot different. So, and it wasn't just Kadari Richmond. They had I forget the name of the kid who was on this team last year, who I think he had 20 points in both games. In that second game, where it was kind of a revenge game where UConn won on senior night, was essentially they basically just said, okay, if you want to ISO, do it, and we'll just kind of beat you with our entire collective of teams. So I'll look his name up before the pod is over, but there's not a ton of insight into this game. This is very similar to if you're playing a bye game. And I say that kind of sadly, because as much as I want UConn to just destroy Seton Hall, it's still a team that you have to respect because they're a Big East team. It's a New Jersey team. It's Dan's alma mater. So, defensively, what are they? 114 in KenPom. That's worse than us now because we're in the top 100 again. Woohoo! They're 290 something in offense, 292. The team can't score. They average 62 points a game. Most of those points, they scored a lot more of those early on in the season against inferior opponents, who essentially is kind of on their level at this point. When you look at KenPom about where like Seton Hall is, the teams around them are Fordham, Indiana State, Hofstra. I mentioned Boston College. Nebraska Omaha is ahead of them. Quinnipiac is ahead of them. Drexel, Maine, Nichols, Elon, not Elon Musk, the school Elon in North Carolina. UMass. Robert Morris is 168 in the net. I mean, it's silly. It's silly how far a team like Seton Hall can drop when you don't get the talent that you typically do. And it's sad. I want the Big East to be better. Because there are two possible outcomes for the Big East. It can either die on the vine and UConn doesn't stick around and they go to the Big 12 or another, ridiculous conference, super conference. Or, as a buddy of mine has said recently, that once all this revenue sharing happens, the Big East teams won't be expected to give as much on the rev share because they don't have major college football. And that includes UConn because they're an independent. And what that will do is give them the type of money through NIL and otherwise to have like these $4 or $5 and $6 million rosters. And the Big East could end up being the best basketball conference in the country. So I don't know if that's true. This is just that was one man's opinion. He's a basketball coach that just hates mediocre football. And I'm with him. I think UConn's got something going with football. So that's a story for another day. This UConn team should not have any problems. Isaiah Coleman averaging 15 points a game and 5 rebounds. He's their big offensive piece. Chaunce Jenkins, 11.5 a game, probably their best 3-point shooter at 42, almost 1.5%. And then Dylan Adawasu is essentially their point guard, right? He's averaging just under 10 points a game. He facilitates their offense. Prince Ali, I can't think of I'm probably saying his name wrong, so I'm just going to call him Prince Ali, like in Aladdin. He's shooting 47.3% from the floor, averaging 8 points and 3.5 rebounds. And then I mentioned Scotty Middleton, who I liked in the transfer portal. They're just a bad shooting team. 40% overall, 32% from three. They turn it over 13 times a game. They have no depth. They really rely on these top 3 players. If any of these guys get in foul trouble, I see this as a 20-point plus win without a doubt. And if it's not, it's going to look awful in the metrics. So it kind of has to be like a hammer down. I know Dan doesn't like to do this in conference. I know he respects Shaheen a lot, but he needs to treat this like he's playing Sacred Heart and beat them by 50 points. That to me would solidify this team in terms of just not playing down to their opponents. Come out. You just had a great win against Creighton. Don't let it get to your head. Stay humble, stay hungry, kill this team, move forward. When we get back from the break, is this a get-right game for Alex? I think it might be. You're locked on. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating, well, it's easy because you have chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day. We used Factor when our daughter was born 4 months ago, and I couldn't tell you how easy it is for me to just pop in a nutritious meal in the Protein Plus for me, and I think my wife did the Calorie Smart. Don't tell me why. She was coming off of giving a baby. She could have gotten whatever she wanted, but it kept us fueled throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege 50 off and use code LockedOnCollege 50 off. All one word to get 50% for your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege 50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, back on Locked On UConn. We're kind of previewing and getting you ready for the Seton Hall game this weekend. I obviously don't think there's going to be an issue. I hope they don't play down to their opponent and win this game by like 10 or 15 points. They really should beat this team by 20 to 30 points. That is how bad they are. And can anyone get hot at home? Sure. But UConn is playing well. They need to keep the momentum going, not allow a team that is basically a quad 3 or quad 4 type team dictate play just because they're at home. This typically is the type of game where Alex Karaban can shine. And I don't mean that in a denigrating way towards him, because his splits have looked so much better against quad 2, 3, and 4 opponents than against quad 1. So it's what we call a get right game in the business. And I think there's plenty of times, I'll be the first to admit, the Giants in the NFL, my favorite team, are a get-right team for struggling competitors and competing teams that are Super Bowl contenders, right? If you have the Giants on your schedule and you just had a tough matchup against, say the Rams or the Eagles or whatever, and, defending Super Bowl champions eventually next year, it makes me gross to think about that. But anyway, if you got the Giants after a tough loss against the Chiefs, guess what? They'll get you right because they're going to get your confidence up. They're going to make you feel better. And that's what this game should look like for Alex, because he's going to have bigger windows to shoot. I know he's on the road, but I think this could be an opportunity for him to hit 2, 3, 4 threes and kind of get himself righted, get that ship corrected, and then off to the races. Because I don't want him to regress to, all right, I missed my first shot, so I'm not going to shoot anymore. The Alex we saw in the Creighton game is the Alex I want to see mindset-wise. Do I want him to make half of those shots? Absolutely. 30% of those from 3. If he makes 2 of those, we win that game by 2 possessions. So if he makes 3 or 4, maybe we're winning that game by 10 or 12 points. So the idea is, now that Liam has essentially caught the attention of the basketball world and all of the attention will be on him, I don't expect Liam to have another 38-point performance. He definitely is capable of it. But knowing Shaheen Holloway, knowing how coaches react to stuff like this, it's going to be like, okay, it's one of two things, right? We're going to take away Liam, or we're going to take away everybody else. Seton Hall's not talented enough to do both, and they're not talented enough to stop Liam. So this is an opportunity for Alex to kind of get that 15, 16-point game, but hit 2 or 3 threes and take 15, 20 shots. If I'm Dan, I'm probably playing Alex, not the whole game, but his full complement of minutes, regardless of how badly we beat Seton Hall, because I want him to continue to lead and continue to keep shooting the shots that he should. So that to me is why this game is important. The only reason why this game is important is for that. I think that they should keep Haas out another game. Rest him. Don't even worry about it. Get him ready for the Villanova game. Because we're going to need his ball handling against that team. They play a little tougher defense. And then also continue what I talked about the last couple games. Look, this team isn't as good as the 23 and 24 teams, but it's definitely a national title contender because they have options. And what I mean by that is Dan and Luke's offensive system puts you in the right position. You have to read the right options. And I showed an example of this with Cam Spencer. Obviously a different world with Cam and Donovan Clingan, but you saw Solo on the court in that exact same game. You saw Alex Karaban. The pieces are there. Just need this guy named Liam McNeely to continue to be the focal point of these offenses on these DHOs and the action going to the basket. Because what does that do? It opens up 3-point opportunities for everyone else and lob opportunities for Sampson and Terrace. One thing I will think you will see more of in this game is whoever is coming off of those screens, whether it's Liam or Alex, maybe Solo, is going to throw up a couple lobs to the big boys to get them feeling pretty good about themselves, because that wasn't an option against Ryan Kalkbrenner. So be ready for that. Other than that, guys, they just got to play a solid game. If they shoot the 50% from the floor like they usually do, if they shoot close to 40% from three, they win this game going away. And then we will get ready for the Villanova game, and I will be in the building. When we return, take another quick break. And there was a little bit of a debate on where UConn's ceiling is come tournament time. I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I will go over a few different scenarios of where this team could be coming up after the break. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player late to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I'm missing my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, back to Locked On UConn. All right, so my cousin's husband, Chris Smith, not the Chris Smith, our Chris Smith at Bad Choice Milk on Twitter, brought up if UConn wins out, meaning they win. Let's pull up their schedule. I think he said, and I want to look this up because I want to make sure I'm not being off here. But if UConn was to win out, and let's go to, I need to get them on. I need to get UConn's schedule on Bookmark because I look at it constantly and I'm always searching for it like an idiot. Let's see here. So we got UConn. They play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more games. Plus, if they were to win out Big East tournament, 10 games. So potential to be 27-7 if they win out. I think with looking at their schedule, Seton Hall is going to drop their analytics. Villanova is likely a quad 2 win unless something crazy happens. I'm pretty sure home, you have to be in the top 25 for it to be a quad 1. At St. John's will be a quad 1 game on the 23rd versus Georgetown. At home will be a quad 2. Providence will be a quad 2. Marquette will be quad 1. Seton Hall quad 3 or 4. So there's just not enough meat on the bones for them to win out and get all the way up to, even if they were to win out and beat St. John's, Marquette, and then one of the, either both St. John's and Marquette again, or one of the two, or Creighton in the Big East tournament, you're likely looking at a 3 seed max. If they win what would end up being 11 straight games, because they won against Creighton, and then if they were to win 10 more, they'd be on an 11-game winning streak going into the NCAA tournament. I don't think it'll matter whether they're a 4 or a 3 seed, because if they're on an 11-game win streak, it's going to be lookout for UConn, and it's going to be one of the biggest stories of the tournament if they were to do this. I think we're all, and this is just a for instance from a really good friend and also a really great follow on Twitter. So it's not about like getting ahead of ourselves. It's just a thought process of where they could be. If I'm being completely fair and honest, they're going to beat Seton Hall. I truly believe they'll beat Villanova. I think they can beat St. John's in Madison Square Garden. I think that's a 50-50 because it was that's in stores. They beat Georgetown. They beat Providence. I think they will beat Marquette at home. I'll be in the building for that one as well. I think they beat Seton Hall. So if there is a game, they could either get swept by St. John's or they could lose at home against Marquette. So I think there's an option for them to end up losing one of these games, one, not two, in my opinion, and then go into the tournament with eight losses into the Big East tournament. So 26-8, 20, somewhere in that range. Where if they lose in the Big East tournament, maybe they're 25-9 and they're a 6 seed or a 4. I think that there's I think again, winning out, they're a high 3 seed, meaning like the best 3 seed probably in or second best. And then if they were to lose one of these games, I think it knocks them down a peg to a 4. If they were to lose a couple, meaning one in the regular season, one in the Big East tournament, I think that they're a 6 seed. I don't think they'll get the dreaded 5. I think typically that's an area where I feel as if they're in a good position to end up winning and going on a run. I don't want them in the 5 spot because they're going to play a 12 seed that is typically very good, mid-major or otherwise. But the way this team is presently constituted, I think there's a really good shot that if they were to win out and go on a run, that they are 100% a title contender. But that dreaded word consistency has to come into play. If they do the similar things against Seton Hall, that'll be another step of the building block, and then adding on to it to Villanova and so on and so forth. So we will see. This will get out later today. Really appreciate you guys jumping on in riding with us as always. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters are always rising. And as always, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.